everybody, it's me, Kristen. I just wanted to make this another video about what happened with Kevin Smith. You guys might have heard about it already. He's some kind of like famous director or actor, I'm not really sure, but he was riding on a Southwest Airlines flight. I mean, this is kind of old news by now, but and he got kicked off because he was too fat. And the crazy thing is that he fit in the seat with this arms rest down, and he was able to buckle his seatbelt. So it was, and there were other fat people on the flight, and it was just like the pilot decided that he was a flight hazard, and they kicked him off the plane, and then they put him on another plane to take him to his flight wherever he was going. So this is clearly a case of discrimination based on what? He looked too fat. I mean, this is not any way to decide if someone's a flight risk, but I mean, it's ridiculous because what, a plane weighs how many tons, and one person who's like overweight is gonna risk the flight? I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. He was twittering about it and stuff, and I guess he's given up his pursuing of twittering and stuff like that about it, but I still think it's really wrong that they can just like decide. Well, basically I think the thing was that they were thinking he needed 2 seats or something instead of 1, but then, you know, why don't they just, if people need bigger seats, you know, they make people buy 2 seats, but that's not really gonna work that well either. Why don't they make some seats that are bigger, that don't cost as much as first class, but, you know, because those seats aren't sometimes big enough, you know, make them bigger for people so they aren't posing a flight risk. You know, if they need to pay more for the bigger seats, then that should be fair, but then, you know, then people won't have to sit next to the fat people on the plane. And, you know, make accommodations available. It's like making a seat available for a disabled person on a bus or something. There's no reason why, you know, this big controversy, like, people are always like, just lose the weight, you fatty, blah, 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 you know. Well, you know, fat people still have to get around in the world, and screaming at people to lose weight is not going to help them lose weight. I can tell you from firsthand experience, it just makes people feel worse, and being an asshole to someone who is fatter does not help them in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, why don't they just make accommodations for fat, you know, have some fat seats for people, because the 2-seat thing doesn't work that well, because you can't really sit in 2 seats. They're not designed correctly anyway. And, you know, make them slightly more expensive, and, you know, reserve them for fatter people, and then if nobody fat is on the flight, which is rare, then make them for, you know, let skinny people sit in. You know, the seats are not that big, and then I've heard they're going to make them smaller. Even skinny people are squashed in those seats, so, you know. Anyway, the thing was that this was just like totally kind of random. Like, it's how these policies are enforced, is by random discrimination against people who they deem too fat to fit in a seat. I mean, he was sitting there with the armrest down, and he was buckled in, but they still kicked him off. They kicked him off the flight, and then they put him on another flight. So how does that make it like, oh, well, he's too fat for this plane, but not for the next plane? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It reminds me of, actually, this case called Plessy v. Ferguson, and also, it was like a really big discrimination case back in like 1900 or something, and people were excluded from trains because they were a certain race or color. And people used to be excluded from certain train sections because they were like 1/25 black or something, or if any percentage of them was like deemed black, then they were excluded from a train car or something and made to sit in the black section or whatever. But I'm not saying that racism and fat discrimination are exactly the same, at all. Each, things are different, and I don't want to equate a history of slavery with fat oppression, but what I want to say is it's discrimination to randomly kick someone off an airplane there's no standards. I think he looks too fat, so I'm going to kick him off the plane. Well, that's, just ridiculous. And there were other fat people on the plane, too, because he talked about a guy who was like, oh, please don't turn me in, I don't want to be kicked off, but, so, it's just a really sad state of affairs, and the really awful sad thing, too, is that people don't see it as discrimination. All they do is go, oh, you should just lose weight, you big fatty. So, people need to get a clue that it's actual discrimination. Just because it's about fatness, they think they can just say, oh, it's just, you need to lose weight, you big fatty, blah, blah, blah. If you weren't so fat and didn't eat all the time, then you wouldn't have this problem. Well, that's not really what it is about, and besides, if anyone has struggled with weight issues, they know it's not just about eating right and losing weight and exercising, and it's complicated and it's difficult, and it's not like you can just quit eating forever, because you have to eat every day, and there are other things that happen. Even if it is people's fault that they're fat, you shouldn't be allowed to discriminate against people because of it. It's just ridiculous, Why can't we be more accepting of people who are different weights? It's crazy. So, anyway, I just wanted to talk about that, and I guess I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!